Throughout all of history, nothing has the innate ability to invoke the entire gamut of human emotion, quite like music. Long before we built cities, flew to the moon, or even drew stick figures on cave walls, we worked out that a simple rhythm had a special power. Music's form may differ greatly from culture to culture, but it plays a vital role in every single one that we know of. Why? What makes music so special? Because on some base level, you could say that it's just vibrations in air, or even that it's just mathematics. And that might be true, but you could also claim that it's the apex of human cultural achievement. We've turned those vibrations in air into joy, hope, grief, and love, often all at once. The great French author Victor Hugo once wrote, "Music expresses that which cannot be said and on which it is impossible to be silent." The visionary philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche declared that without music, life would be a mistake. Even the genius physicist Albert Einstein said, "I often think in music. I see my life in terms of music." And of course, the romantic poets of AC/DC spake, "Rock and roll ain't noise pollution. Rock and roll, it's just rock and roll. Rock and roll, it will survive. Yes, it will. Ha ha." Empires fall, buildings crumble, people die, but music remains alive. I'm Charlotte Ritchie. I love music, and this is, For the Record, an incomplete history of music. Music is something that has been a huge part of my life for always, as I'm sure it is for most of you watching, and I'm going to be your guide through this series. It's worth noting right off the top that this is the Cosmic Shambles Network's biggest production to date, and it had to be. In true Shambles style, over the next 9 episodes, we are going to cram in as much as is humanly possible in a way that no other documentary has ever dared to attempt before, because, well, let's be honest, even by our standards, this is an absurd undertaking. There is, it turns out, a lot of music. We are going to take a journey through the entire history of this thing we call music. What it is, where it comes from, how it works, where it's going, why it matters. We'll touch on pianos and Pythagoras, but we might run out of time for penny whistles and prog. We'll listen to birdsong, Bach, blues, the Beatles and Bad Bunny, but we might have to fly past bonobos, Brahms, bluegrass, the Beastie Boys and Burt Bacharach.
What's it all about?
We'll flit through time and travel all across the world to bring you this story, from deep caves in Germany to some of the world's most iconic concert halls. And we'll even voyage outside of the solar system. We're not subtitling this series An Incomplete History of Music because we're lazy, but because it's simply too big a topic to cover literally everything. But we are going to give it a go. So treat this series like a mixtape, a 10 or so hour long mixtape. Find a bit that you like and then dig deeper into it on the Cosmic Shambles website. But for now, try to think of the last day you didn't hear a single piece of music. Odds are you probably can't think of one, because even if you're not consciously registering hearing it, there is simply music everywhere. An advertising jingle in a supermarket, a worker whistling, perhaps a bird in the trees, or a person playing their music out loud on the bus with no headphones because some people just have no manners. The point is, music is like air. It's everywhere here on Earth, and I'd argue it's just as essential for life. There's even music in space where there isn't any air, thus making it much better, in fact, than very boring, stupid, dumb air. Not to be too harsh on air, though, because Moon Safari, firstly, is a very great album, and also because one of the very fundamental reasons that we can hear music at all is because we're here. Not here in King's Place Concert Hall in central London, but more broadly here on Earth, where there's lots of air made up of molecules and matter all banging together. So let's start our history of music right here at the very start of things. right at the very start of everything, in fact, before there was any air. Because, to paraphrase Carl Sagan, to make a sound, first, you have to make a universe.
In the beginning, when the universe was hot and dense, there were fluctuations in density. There were places with a little bit more density, places with a little less. But it was this hot, dense plasma soup everywhere.
I think people have the idea that the Big Bang should be a bang, right? It feels like you should start with, I don't know, a drum roll or the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer lion roaring or something. But we don't know what happened at the moment of the Big Bang, but we do know that sound waves existed in that very early universe.
It was, matter, ions, protons, electrons, and radiation. And there was also dark matter, which we don't know a whole lot about, but it's a kind of invisible stuff that seems to hold matter together, and there were density variations in that as well. And in the beginning, all of those density fluctuations, there would be places with a little bit more of everything and places with a little less of everything. And the places with more, there would be oscillations in that plasma.
So in the early days in space, you would have been able to hear somebody scream if they were there. And these sound waves propagate through as the universe expands, and then there's a point where the universe is cool enough that all the electrons can be captured by atoms. And so suddenly the universe goes transparent to light, and sound stops propagating, because suddenly the density is not enough for sound waves.
Because it would be pulled in by its own gravity, but pushed out by its pressure. And we call those baryon acoustic oscillations.
Acoustic oscillations is just sound. It's physicists speak for making sound. And then the baryon bit is that we observe this in normal matter, in electrons. So in our universal model, we have baryons, which are everything you've heard of, electrons, neutrons, carbon, oxygen, protons, all of that stuff. And then we think there's this dark matter as well. But here what we're seeing is it's the electrons that carry the sound. So it's in the normal matter.
And so there would be this kind of humming everywhere in the universe or during this hot, dense phase where the gravity is pulling things in and pressure is pushing things out. And so there were pressure waves, and sound is just pressure waves. It's waves of pressure in some medium.
So what sound is a push, but it's a push that travels through a crowd. And it could be a crowd of gas molecules, like in the air. It could be a crowd of molecules in a liquid, and it could be a crowd of molecules in a solid. And so each molecule pushes on the next one, which pushes on the next one, which pushes on the next one. And so you send a message of pushes without the individual molecules going anywhere. So sound is a way of knowing that something's happened just because a push travels through the environment rather than because anything actually moves.
In this case, the medium was the hot plasma filling all of space, and the pressure waves were set up by the gravitational pull of the density variations. And so when we look at the very early universe, when we look at what we call the cosmic microwave background, which is the glow that comes to us from that time in the very early universe, and we see it kind of at the edges of our vision in all directions because the light is coming from the farthest reaches of the universe, because that's the light that takes the longest to get here. So we can actually see that hot, dense phase, and we see these waves in it. We see these acoustic waves sort of rippling through that space.
We see the imprint of those sound waves. So we can work out what notes they are, and we can work out what the universe would sound like as an instrument. What you've actually got is all sorts of sound waves at all sorts of frequencies propagating through the universe, and the relation between them determines things like the structures that will go on to form galaxies and galaxy clusters. But it means it's a fairly flat response, so it's more like white noise than a heaven's trumpet blowing at the beginning of the universe. So you can take any sound and you can play it using the whole universe as an instrument, but basically it sounds crap.
It would be loud. You would have these density fluctuations. You'd have pressure waves. It would be sound, right? Like we can see it because the light has taken some time to get to us, so we can see it as it was, but that light can travel through the vacuum, the sound cannot. And so we can see the imprints of those sound waves the same way you might see ripples on a pond. You know that represents waves, but you're only seeing a static picture. We're not hearing that sound.
So if we can't hear that very first sound, why is it so important that we know it existed at all?
And what's cool about this is that you can think about how this happened in the early universe, and then it imprints on the cosmic microwave background this spectrum, the sort of final beat of that early sound. And then you can look at the galaxies around us and look at how they're shaped. You can look at the scales on which they cluster, how big the biggest galaxy cluster is. And you can find in that structure the same pattern that you see in the microwave background. So those early sounds, those acoustic oscillations, we still see in the structure of the galaxies today. And then if you know they're the same, they're a yardstick. So you can work out how much the universe has expanded. So this is a way that we measure the expansion of the universe by comparing the size of those early sound waves and the effect they have on the early universe to what we see around us today. So it really is the physics of sound that sets the scale on which our universe evolves.
In telling the story of music, we are going to need to jump around a bit, just like House of Pain instructed. So in that spirit, let's jump forward now, ever so slightly, say about 13.8 billion years, to a time when we have an Earth, and an Earth now full of humans with ears.
Pack it up, pack it in, let me begin. I came to win, battle me, that's a sin. I won't ever slack up, punk, you better back up. Try and play the role and you're the whole crew will act up. Feeling funky, amps in the trunk, and I got more rhymes than this cops at a junkie donut shop. Sure enough, I got props from the kids on the hill with my mom and my pops. I came to get down, I came to get down. So get out your seat and jump around, jump around. Jump up and get down.
So from the moment you're born, you are processing a world where you have sound all around you all the time.
Standing here in the air at the moment, I am surrounded by wobbling molecules. And, you know, there might be a dog over there that's barking, and that sends this wobble through the air, and that's arriving from over there. And there's another one, you know, might be a boat over there that's arriving from over there. So the air around my head is wobbling in all these different ways. And the task for my ears is to pick out, to separate those different wobbles, to separate the noise of a boat from the noise of a dog, and to know which direction it's coming from.
So the way our ears work, for example, the fact that I know that if I close my eyes and if I move my head, I would still be able to tell that you're talking to me from right there. That's because the sound from you is reaching my ears at slightly different times and at slightly different volumes. And that's what helps me localize sound. So that's one part of the trick.
It's a lot easier to sense sound in water.
So it's all compressions and rarefactions. That's how it propagates. But the difference in the medium is obviously the viscosity of the medium, the density of the medium. So the viscosity of water is higher than that of air. So basically it's facing more resistance.
And so inside our ear, we've got a fluid-filled cavity, and it's got lots of little hairs in it. So if the fluid wobbles, then the hairs wobble, and our ear can detect the hairs. And so the clever bit, the thing that all of our ear does, is it gets the wobbles from the air into that little tube of fluid with the wobbling hair molecules. So it's this chain, it's really clever chain of events that turn wobbles in the air into wobbles inside liquid in my ear, and that's the sort of thing my brain can detect.
And our eyes have come round the front of our head like predators, so that we have very, very good stereoscopic vision for sticking things with spears, but we don't have 360 vision like horses or goats or things that are looking for the tiger that's coming to bite them on the bum. Our ears, however, are still firmly on the side of our heads, unlike things like owls, who have very much forward-facing ears so that they can use that same stereoscopy to catch prey in the dark. We still have this incredible 360 binaural hearing.
I think we're more attuned to what's wrong in the visual world and less attuned to, because there's this whole concept of the uncanny valley, which kind of also exists for audio, but I think you can get away with a bit more. But what research has shown again and again, it's like the audio-visual plausibility that matters. So both vision and audio together. So if you have, let's say, perfect graphics, but then if you mess the sound up significantly, then that really breaks your sense of immersion. So you need both to go hand in hand. So far, I think a lot more focus has gone into into visuals than it has gone into sound. Although a lot of sound engineers will disagree, but generally there's more money in getting the visuals right. But it's the whole experience, the audio-visual experience together that creates that sense of immersion.
When you're listening to sound, you're listening to the structure of the world, the physical structure of the world.
All sound is vibrating air, right? You've got to set the air vibrating somehow. So that's most of playing a brass instrument, is that, basically.
But in terms of distinguishing between different instruments, or let's say just different objects, a lot of it has to do with what we call timbre. And how our ear perceives timbre. So generally sound has a lot of frequency components.
Oh, by the way, we get that music, like science, can be filled with quite a lot of jargon. So from time to time, our musical advisor, Steve Pretty, who you've just seen, might pop in to help out with a quick visit to our music glossary, like this.
Frequency is a physical property of sound waves that determines their pitch, or how high or low a note sounds.
Now, where were we? Oh, yes, good vibrations, giving me the excitations. It's a pun, it's a beach voice.
The audible range is from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, and the timbre determines the range, the frequency spectrum of each sound. So that's what distinguishes like a knocking on wood versus a knocking on some more denser or more porous material. That's what helps us distinguish.
We've had numerous acoustical firms over the years have come here, done studies. There's been some books that have been written studying various places around the world, trying to really codify that and say, well, what is it that makes it special? Carnegie knew his man with Tuthill. So Tuthill happened to be, he was the secretary of the Oratorio Society, for one thing, the group that the hall was built for. But Tuthill was a very talented amateur musician. He played the cello, he played the piano, he sang. His family were all musical. His son became a composer and a professor of music. And he was always fascinated by acoustic environments and what made that work. So as he became an architect, this was really important to him. And you have to remember, this is before there was any kind of a science to acoustics. But he understood this on an intuitive level. He had been with the Oratorio Society as they went around to all these different halls, some better than others. He paid attention to what worked and what didn't. He would do things like watch how a billiard ball would bounce around on a table to think about how sound might reflect. So he really, in an era before people were out there with sound meters and measuring things, and like you said, physicists and all this, that they've all come later trying to understand what it is that makes Carnegie Hall tick. And so yes, many people have come along later and tried to study. And I think you can, they've been able to maybe point to certain things and isolate certain factors, take certain measurements at Carnegie Hall and say, we think it's this. But I bet you if you were to try and pick that up and reproduce it somewhere else, would it work, would it not? I don't know. I think the chances are it probably wouldn't. So I do find that kind of fascinating, this interplay of the theory and that you can't, it's impossible to manufacture that. It kind of happens. It doesn't happen by accident, but at the same time, it's not, there isn't really a mathematical formula that's going to produce it.
Yeah, all of it matters. So the size of the room that you're in, the shape that you're in, the materials on the walls, and also the materials, like the furniture in the room, all of that gives a different characteristic to sound. That's because when I'm speaking to you in this room, the waves that are coming out of my mouth are then being reflected. One of them is going to you directly, but then there's a lot of other waves that are being reflected by all of the objects in the room and reaching you.
So whenever you hit something, it usually vibrates. It kind of, it'll wobble, but it'll do it in a very specific way. So we know that if we hit a bell, and we hit a big bell, because it's big and slow, it will wobble, but it will wobble slowly because it's big, and the whole thing will kind of wobble together. The entire shape of the bell changes. And when that happens, the outside of the bell is pushing on the air, because as it wobbles in and out, air molecules are getting pushed and pushed and pushed.
Some materials can absorb sound better, some will reflect sound more. So the things that reflect sound more is what gives you more reverberation, whereas something that's much drier, which helps a lot when we're talking, you want speech to be clear, so you don't want extra reverberation. So there's all of that that plays into it.
Okay, definitely time that we had a big budget, high-tech demonstration.
Well, this is a great toy, and I am not any kind of musician, as you can tell. But the thing that is interesting about a glockenspiel like this is that you've got all these different lumps of the world, lots of lumps of metal, and this basically distorts them a tiny bit when you hit something. I can't even hit it straight. When you hit something, you're giving it a kick, and then it's the wrong shape, and what will happen is it wobbles as it finds the right shape again. So physically, as I hit this, the end of this is pushing in on that metal bar, and the metal bar deflects ever so slightly, it bends. But then a bent bar is not the right shape, so it'll push back, and it'll overshoot, it'll go too far, and then it'll go too far that way, and it'll push back. So as soon as you hit something, it's going to wobble until it finds its way back to a neutral position where it's not doing anything. And because this one is quite a big metal bar, when it wobbles, it can only wobble slowly. So the note that is sent out into the world is a really slow note, is a deep note, because it's wobbling really slowly.
A note is a distinct and isolatable sound.
Whereas if I hit this one, that's a very little bar. So when I hit it, it's really stiff, so it wobbles really quickly. And it's still going to wobble until it gets back to its neutral position, but it's going to wobble much, much, much faster, which means it pushes on the air much, much, much faster, and that's what sends sound out into the world. So what you're hearing when you hear sound is you're very specifically hearing the structure. What you're hearing metal, you're hearing how metal bends, and how elastic it is, and how it's wobbling. And so sound is just a sort of manifestation of a physical structure wobbling. That's all it is.
Okay, so we've got ourselves a universe, an Earth, some wobbling molecules, and things that can hear those wobbles. Just a quick side note here, because just in case you're wondering, current research indicates that broadly dinosaurs had well-developed inner ears that were evolved to hear low-end sounds like footsteps and rumbles, but a very limited hearing range overall, so high-pitched noises were likely undetectable. So despite their close evolutionary link to birds, they were very unlikely to be melodic. What we're saying is that a Triceratops is more likely to like Tom Waits than Minnie Riperton. Moving on. Human experimentation on different types of materials, wobbling in all sorts of different ways, is how we ended up with the litany of different sounds and instruments, but we'll get to that in time. For now, we've got sound and we've got noise. To that point, the great Dizzy Gillespie said that he didn't care very much for music. What he liked was sounds. But that's jazz for you. And every teenager has probably had a parent or older relative tell them that their favourite music isn't music, it's just noise. This is probably more to do with age and cultural differences, but it does raise an interesting question. When does noise become music? When is a sound a song? And is there a defined difference?
So a common definition, you've probably heard this, is organised sound. That can mean so many different things, but I like it because it suggests something deliberate that we've done to sound, and that maybe distinguishes it a bit from sound art, that there's a big, overlap between the two. And it doesn't seem very culturally specific. Organised sound, every culture that we know of makes some kind of organised sound. So that definition works for me.
Humans love patterns. All the time, all throughout our life, our brains are looking for patterns, analysing patterns, and that's how we learn about the world. We kind of go, when I do A, B happens. I've learned a thing. And music it's just patterns in noise.
I've never looked up the color blue in the Encyclopedia Britannica. How do you describe a Picasso painting, or how do you describe a Debussy work? You can talk about it in terms where it can become very academic and it doesn't make any sense. I mean, you could say, Debussy, used whole tone scales, and Picasso, evolved cubism, and and you're, well, you have to be in it to feel it and to experience it.
I think if you think back a few years to Bob Dylan winning the Nobel Prize for Literature, some people objected to that because he was a songwriter and sort of specified that they thought that songwriting, because of the music element, maybe was not worthy of being sort of praised in that way and held up in that way. And I think that to me feels sort of obviously wrong, because you're still writing the words, even if you're writing them for a particular context, and we're always writing things for a particular context. Nothing sort of exists by itself.
No, there are certain rules and regulations to it. I mean, you just don't sit down and write a song, I mean, there's a certain amount of learning you have to, to go through to get to that point, and not only living experience, but I mean, you also have to learn how to, you have to learn how to play an instrument, some kind of, you have to carry some kind of tune, I guess.
One thing that thinking about the songs as lyrics allows us to do is to engage. I mean, again, just thinking about what does it mean to study literature? Well, so often it means just looking beyond the page. And I think the example of Shakespeare is a really good one, because he's also often writing plays that are supposed to be performed. And when we talk about Shakespeare plays in the classroom, often we're talking about the context of early modern performance.
Now get you to my lady's chamber, and tell her that her paint an inch thick. To this favor she must come. Make her laugh at that.
A lot of it's to do with context. I think, we like to be able to have simple labels between this is music, this is noise, this is just sound. But really, all of these things, one of the wonderful things about music, and I think the thing that makes it endlessly fascinating for me, is that it is, particularly abstract sound, is able to convey somehow a much wider range of human emotions than words can sometimes. Because often I think, you think of, for example, emotional states, it's rare that people are entirely happy or entirely sad. There'll be something in the middle, and something about music that can really tap into that. That's why playing one note on a conch shell can make someone cry in the right context, even though, I mean, in what sense is that music? It's one note. You can, if you open a squeaky door, that's also one note, but that doesn't necessarily make people cry. The context of what the intention is, if you like, of the sound is a big part of it, I think.
I mean, my understanding of music is informed by my experience growing up in New Orleans, where music is a communal experience. It's not only communal for the musicians who are performing, it's a communal experience for the people who are in the presence of the music.
Okay, so I haven't personally gone round and checked, but I'm almost certain that every record in this shop was made by humans, which begs another important and complicated question when we try and define music. Is it something that is inherently human? Are we the only ones that ascribe a deeper meaning to these sounds we call music? Or look at it another way, is birdsong really a song, or is it just a noise we enjoy? At appropriate times, for example, not a family of pigeons on your balcony at 5 a.m.
So zoomusicology is the study of music-like sounds made by non-human species. It's a term that's been in use for about 30 years. It was coined by the French composer François Bernard Mack. People have been studying the relationship or thinking about the relationship between human music and animal songs for as long as we have records, really, going back to the ancient Greeks and further.
Bird songs are different from the rest of the sounds that birds make. They could be described as sentences rather than conversational notes or words, and they have a very different function to all other birds' sounds. So when a bird is calling, it's often reacting to a situation like alarm, or it's trying to keep in contact. And to do that, it needs easily recognized, often very short notes. So it might just go tick, The same bird, if it's singing, has a great deal more to say. It's trying to achieve something. In fact, two things. It's trying to, first of all, acquire a territory that it can call its own, and secondly, it wants to attract a mate to that same territory.
So I wrote my doctoral dissertation about whether animal songs are music, and at the time I was writing it, I was thinking, okay, I'll just figure out what music is, and then I will figure out whether animals do that or not. And through the course of doing that research, I came to basically think, well, there's not really anything that's music. I certainly think that there's no way of defining music that would include all things, all human music or all human music that humans consider to be music and exclude all animal songs. Some people like to arbitrarily say music is a human activity, so that's not, how I define it, but, anybody can define music how they want.
If we define it in a certain way rigidly, then probably there wasn't music before humans. But if you look at it more in relation to exploration of sound, I mean, animals use sound for communication, survival, and so on, different reasons. But they have evolved, I think, also complex ways of, not only communicating but creating birdsong.
Well, I find it useful to make a distinction between music and musicality. Musicality is the potential to process sound and produce sound in ways that we as humans regard as musical. So I think, other species, birds, some other primates, whales, probably lots of species actually have some aspects of musicality in that they're able to decipher complex sounds that they hear around them and sometimes to produce complex sounds, often for communicative purposes. So clearly that's what whales are doing, that's what birds are doing.
So in general, the whale family is split into two. So the baleen whales use deep notes. If you think about, you look at the keyboard of a piano and you look at all the notes down the low end, the baleen whales are down there. They're the ones that make the really haunting, sort of long sounds that get shared as whale song. Whereas up at the other end, at frequencies mostly higher than we can hear, the dolphins and the toothed whales are squeaking and clicking, and they're using the high notes to communicate between themselves. And so both types of whale are using sound, but they're using quite different frequency ranges. And the baleen whales, these calls that they're making, they're social calls. A lot of them, they're related to mating, they're communicating between pods. Those deep notes, those are the ones that can travel a very, very long way in the right conditions. And so it's known that they produce very distinctive patterns that you can, like a whale song can go on for 30 minutes. And they sometimes sing them back to each other, and it's a social bonding thing. They're communicating between their pod, but it can be over very, very long distances. Whereas the toothed whales up at the high frequencies, they're making their high notes for two reasons. One of them is that they're also communicating. If you're in a pod of dolphins and you put your head underwater, you can hear this sort of clicking and popping, and that's the dolphins basically chattering away to each other. But they also echolocate. So they send out high frequencies in the same way a bat does, and they get a picture of their world in sound, and they effectively see with sound. So they're both communicating with these whistles, and they are echolocating with the clicks. So, but the two types of whales can't hear each other. They migrate over extremely long distances. They have to know where they're going. They have to know where the rest of their pod is. They have to be able to find each other. They need to help each other. So those pods help each other out with feeding and with looking after calves. And they need to understand their environment, right? Where's the ice? Where are the boats? Where are the humans? If you're migrating a long way, you kind of need to know about all of that. And so they'll be listening out for cues that tell them exactly where to migrate and whether they should go, whether there's more food in this area or that area, so that they're getting information all the time.
That's what chimpanzees are doing when they give this kind of hooting sound. None of those are musical in the sense that we mean music, because none of them seem to have the complex kind of syntax and the kind of nestedness that we have in human music.
There have been experiments which show that there's a part of a chimpanzee's brain that will respond to consonant and dissonant intervals in the same way we do. They have what's known as oscillatory phase lock. They will actually feel displeasure and feel uncomfortable with dissonant intervals. You know, they also feel happier and more relaxed with consonant intervals, and it's the same with lots of other animals. But I mean, it depends what you call music.
And you know, some of these sounds, birdsong for example, is very stereotyped. You know, there is some improvisation, but it's we'd call it improvisation, but it's using a very sort of small selection of themes. And what seems to be important often in birdsong is not, if you like, the tune, but the ability of the bird to just be creative, to just be innovative in some way that will attract attention.
So every bird song is slightly different, and so in many cases they learn their songs from their father or from their father's neighbours, or they imitate another bird, and they will need to put that song into practice, because what they're doing when they're singing is very important. They do not want to have a sub-optimal song. If their song's not good enough, they may actually miss out on the opportunity to breed. So if they don't sing well enough, they may not be able to hold a territory. And if they don't breed, they may only live, like a robin, may only live for another year in its whole life. So if it doesn't sing properly, its whole life purpose actually may not be fulfilled.
A nightingale will call to another nightingale from a massive distance, and the complexity of the song is what attracts the female of the species. So it's kind of, you know, in a way that the more complex the bird song, the more romantic it is.
One of Marion's recent movie jobs was in Green Mansion. She did the whistling supposed to be coming from actress Audrey Hepburn. The idea is that Miss Hepburn is from the spirit world, in a jungle, and through her strange bird sound, she helps actor Tony Perkins find his way with calls like, "Here I am." "Stop, there's danger." "Come on, follow me." Just beautiful. Marion, we're very grateful to you, but I was... Oh, now, wait a minute. There's just one other favor I'd like to ask you, Marion. I don't want to be rude, but...
Of course I can, Jack. I can talk like a human being, too, but there really isn't any more to say, is there, Ted Bradley? Except, as Jack always says...
In the late 1990s, I went to study in Amsterdam, and there was one night shortly after I had moved there that I heard this amazing bird singing outside my window. It was sort of in the early morning hours before it got light, and I threw up in the window, and I was just fascinated by the way short bits of what this bird sang sounded a lot like human music, but the whole song you would never mistake for human music. I listened to that bird in a way I had never really listened to birdsong before, and I ended up writing a piece called Night Black Birdsong, which explores sort of the differences in between how a blackbird and a person would put together the same motifs, because a lot of the motifs that a blackbird uses could be things that a human would use as well.
So those characteristics are absolutely ones that transfer to human music making, but I don't think that they qualify those kinds of, even birdsong and whale song, I don't think really qualifies, even though we call it song, it doesn't quite qualify as music in the sense that we have it, but it stems from the same cognitive resources that we have.
People with pets, most notably dogs, will often leave the radio on when they go out, as it can help the dog with separation anxiety or masking other noises. But the big question from dog owners is, what station would they best like? Well, it's something that Emily and her colleagues are currently researching, how animals respond to human music, but at the time of filming, we haven't got the results in. So we don't know yet what our canine companions prefer, but it's probably classical music. Specifically, Bach.
Well, the one thing we've learned about the animal world as we have gone on in studying it is that it was basically an assumption that animals are very functional, right? They do this to get that. They go to A because it lets them get B. When actually we all know that's not true, right? We all watch our dogs and our cats and they play, they muck about. So I think the idea that any animal only, especially a mammal that is, you know, quite well evolved, the idea that it has something and it only uses it for a functional reason is a little bit suspect, I think, because we see dolphins play, right? We see them playing in the water, so why wouldn't they sometimes play with the sound they make? Why wouldn't they use that sound to communicate, can we play? And for the whale song, it's not entirely clear. You know, we don't know what's going on inside a whale's head, but it does seem that it's not entirely a functional thing. Mothers and their calves will sing to each other a little bit. And there's also a very fine line between play and between what becomes functional, right?
We know what we feel like when we're making music. So we say, I'm singing this song because I really love singing it. It feels good, or it's beautiful, or I'm very expressive, I'm expressing myself.
Try to do this, what to do with the rest of it.
But in fact, there's often functional things going on as well. Like maybe I'm saying, I love this repertoire, I'm part of the group of people that love this kind of music, these are my people. Or maybe we're singing and getting paid, maybe we're trying to show off, you know, there's lots of music competitions, people are trying to show that they're the best or they're really good. There's, you know, exams where you're showing that you've reached a certain level. But I think because we also have our subjective experience of it, we think, oh, we do music because we love it, which is also true. It's not one or the other. And same with animals. I think, you know, we can see that, oh, this bird sang that song and this other bird became really interested and came over and, you know, decided to mate with them. But we don't know how they're feeling. Like they might also be thinking, I really love the way I love singing this song. Or they might, you know, and the bird that's listening might be thinking, oh, they're a great singer, and not really thinking only about the functional part of it. So I think it's a mistake to think something is either aesthetic or it's functional. I think most things are actually both at once.
We've had people say, do you have real music in your culture? So I know that it sounds a little different to people who aren't familiar, but I mean, at that point you get into what is music. Is it rhythmic? Is it tonal? Throat singing has a bit of both. So there are songs that are more tonal in nature. There are songs that are more rhythmic in nature. And it's an ancient song form. So there's some regional differences in opinion or story.
And origin story.
Yeah, of how it came to be. So one of the stories is that the men were delayed or something had happened when they were hunting and they didn't come home, and the women and children were hungry. So they started to mimic animal sounds to attract the animals, smaller animals, so that they could catch them for food. And another one is, some Inuit say that the oldest throat song is Kumilawapik, which is pitiful little dog. And so the story goes, there's this young lady and she's raising a dog team and she's teaching them how to pull, and she has this one little runt that just can't keep up and can't do the job. So she runs beside it singing this song, encouraging it to get stronger and faster, and eventually it becomes so strong that it's the leader of the pack.
In a lot of Western sort of classical singing, I guess you could say that a lot of the focus tends to be on synchronized singing. So you're in unison, people are generally singing the same part, but the whole thing about Inuit throat singing that I think people get so shocked by, and it makes it hard to understand who's doing what sound, is because you're not singing in unison. And so generally there is one song that is sung in canon. So there's a leader and a follower. So you're not singing in unison, you're singing the same song at different times. And so that really lends itself to like who's doing what, what am I listening to,
otherworldly,
the sort of polyphonic, multi-rhythmic element of it is what I think a lot of
beats.
I think is what a lot of people really perk up at, because it's so unusual and not how we are used to hearing mainstream singing.
We are capable of organising sound in more complex structures than any species ever has, or probably ever will. But I think that doesn't preclude the idea that, I mean, Einstein had a conversation with Rabindranath Tagore in 1927 in Berlin, where he was talking about the idea of whether the statue of Venus, the Greek statue of Venus, would be beautiful if there was no one around to have seen it. And I think, yes, it would be. And music is now, it exists. We discover it. I don't think we make it. I think the most beautiful music is discovered.
Now, we all know that if you're going to talk about muses, then there really is only one person on earth that you turn to. So, over to you, Natalie Haynes.
Okay, so the muses, or musai, to give them their Greek plural, are 9 goddesses. They are the daughters, usually, although not always, but usually the daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne. And Mnemosyne is memory. And this should give you a clue as to what arts are like in antiquity. Their job descriptions are kind of entailed by their names. So terpsichore is like dancing and song, or euterpe is like being good at dancing. And so, you can kind of tell what they might be interested in as a subject. The story that we get in Hesiod's Theogony is that the muses are born of memory. So memorizing things before things are written is really important. Hesiod and Homer are sort of on the cusp of writing, of alphabetic writing in Greece. And so we've got linear A and B before that, but alphabetic writing is just starting to happen. And so up to that point, if you wanted to perform or create any kind of poetry or performance, you would be doing that from memory. That's the only way you would be able to do it. So that is why memory is the mother of the muses. So, they come together, and this is the thing that comes out. When Hesiod tells us about his conversion from shepherd into poet, it is the muses who do it. So he grew up near the muses, although he doesn't know it at the time because he's busy tending sheep. And then, the sort of mist descends and he hears this beautiful music. And then suddenly these gorgeous women are dancing around him, and they berate him for being a shepherd because it's not a proper job. And they tell him that what he should be doing is poetry. And it's really bracing to see poetry considered the sensible job relative to anything, but there you go.
The memory of events is recorded in song. That's how the epic arises. It's a record of the story of the Trojan War, of Achilles, of Hector, of Odysseus and Penelope. It's seen to be a performance that is memorable because it's music, and music is, of course, both melody and rhythm, and that is enshrined in the words of the Homeric epics, melody and rhythm.
Given the Greeks had gods and goddesses for almost all things, it's only fair to assume there'd be a specific muse for music, right?
I mean, this is a really good question, and we don't have very much mythos about individual muses, much less than you would think. There are beautiful frescoes of them in Pompeii, but that you get a set of muses. You don't tend to get to separate them out. So, you know, whether there are specific differences between the responsibilities of Euterpe, who's good at dancing, or Terpsichore, who's good at dancing, I'm not entirely sure. I think probably, I think you get a good performance from either of them at a push. So, yeah, but we don't get very many separate stories about them, which is a shame. At the beginning of the Odyssey and the Iliad is Homer asking the muses to sing through him in a way which is a little bit more needing of them. It's not just that he needs their inspiration. So at the beginning of the Iliad, he says famously, sing, muse, of the wrath of Achilles, the son of Peleus. At the beginning of the Odyssey, he says, tell me, muse, about a much turned about man. That would be Odysseus. And so both times he's asking, if you're being polite, demanding if you're not, he's asking the muses to give him his story. If they don't sing through him, if they don't sing, he can't. So there isn't a version of ancient poetry in which Homer could create a poem without the help of the muses. If they don't inspire him, there won't be anything at all. And Hesiod obviously starts his poem by saying, you know, I heard all this from the muses, hooray. But it does shift through time. So you get these, an apostrophe as it's called, where you address the muses and ask them to help you out. But I think the muses do get a bit sidelined, but more of a problem is the fact that they just get diminished through time, and they just become, you know, women who make men able to do things, as opposed to women who are very powerful and creative in their own right. They're consistently underestimated. There are very, very few stories about the muses in extant Greek myth. Of course, we've lost the vast majority of things that were written in antiquity. But one that we get more than once is the story of Thamyras. Is a man who's a very brilliant rhapsode, so he's basically like Homer or Hesiod, and he thinks he is so talented that he should be able to challenge the muses to a singing contest, and that's just a terrible idea. And they inevitably win because they literally invented music. And then he is, for his sort of hubris in challenging a goddess, or 9 goddesses in this instance, to a contest, he loses his eyes. And you know, they're allowed to take his capacity to make music as well as his sight. The sirens challenge them to a singing contest, and the sirens are pretty good at singing insofar as almost everyone who hears them drowns. Not because they don't like it, but because they are compelled to throw themselves into the sea. And yet they also lose to the muses. And the muses take the feathers from their wings, which I think is the most RuPaul's Drag Race moment in all of Greek myth. It's like, I'm just going to decorate myself with your feathers, thanks so much. It's just joyous.
To this day, we still hear of artists of all sorts invoking a muse for inspiration. But in modern times, it's usually in reference to a male artist being inspired by their often inappropriately aged lover.
I mean, I think now it's just a very dull thing, isn't it? It's become a sort of trope of male creativity that there should be a ruined woman somewhere in the background, you know, whose happiness has been entirely trampled all over by this man in his pursuit of art. And the, you know, trope is any musician you care to name from the 60s or 70s versus, you know, Picasso is the obvious one in visual arts, and so on and so on. And you don't very often get it going the other way round. It's really interesting. It's a very specific female role. So it is strange to me that these goddesses who are so powerful that Homer and Hesiod can, you know, turn around and say, please, you know, tell me what to make. Tell me, you know, sing through me so I have a poem. They suddenly just become, you know, please be a doormat so that a man can make a thing. And it's like, oh, really? Okay. I would like people to know that the muses are not inspiration, they're the thing. They create this beautiful art. And then if we're really, really lucky, we get to kind of report it. That's our role in this. We are like the amanuensis to these extraordinary creative forces. So they don't make us better and nothing else. We are lucky enough to get near them, and that's what makes us better. Their job isn't to inspire us, it's to give us their incredible creativity.
It's clear that music played an important role in ancient Greece, and it was of great interest to one particular fellow by the name of Pythagoras. In the next episode, we're going to take a look at how Pythagoras and others' mathematical basis of music theory helped shape the art form for thousands of years to come, and why we humans, and specifically why those wet bundles of water, fat, and neurons in our skulls are so utterly enamored by it. Wait, hang on, wait, stop the credits. I need to explain the credits before they get properly started. So at the end of every interview the Shambles crew did for this series, and that was a lot of interviews, we asked each person the same question. Without thinking too much, what is a piece of music that the mere thought of gives you goosebumps, sends a little shiver up your spine, or a tear to your eye? What says to you, yeah, that's what music means to me? We've compiled all these songs and stories in a special bonus episode just for Patreon subscribers. Sign up now and support independent filmmakers and the sort of long-form documentary they've just stopped making in normal Teleland at patreon.com/cosmicshambles. But we're also going to end each episode of this series with a special performance on this very stage of one of those songs that was chosen by someone featured in the episode. And they'll be performed by our Shambles band alongside one of our favourite artists from the Shambles verse. Take it away, other Charlotte.
Tuesday's grey and Wednesday too. Thursday, I don't care about you. It's Friday and I'm in love. Monday, you can fall apart. Tuesday, Wednesday, break my heart. Thursday doesn't even start. It's Friday and I'm in love. Saturday, wait, and Sunday always comes too late, but Friday never hesitate. I don't care if Monday's black. Tuesday, Wednesday, heart attack. Thursday, never looking back. It's Friday, and I'm in love. Stay in bed. Thursday, watch the world instead. It's Friday, and I'm in love. Saturday, wait, and Sunday always comes too late, but Friday never hesitates. Dressed up to the eyes, it's a wonderful surprise to see your shoes and your spirits rise. Throwing out the frown, just smiling at the sound. Sleek as a shriek, spinning round and round. Always take a big bite, it's such a gorgeous sight to see you eat in the middle of the night. You can getting enough of this stuff. It's Friday and I'm in love. I don't care if Monday's blue, Tuesday's grey, and Wednesday too. Thursday, I don't care about you. It's Friday, and I'm in love. Monday, you can fall apart. Tuesday, Wednesday, break my heart. Thursday doesn't